Coming up, what an excellent day for the worst scene in the movie. This is it, folks. We're here. We finally made it. Yay.
A man walks into the office of a Hollywood executive and says, "Have I got a movie for you?" The Hollywood executive, he's intrigued. He says, "Well, go on, pitch it to me." The man begins to piss all over the Hollywood executive's floor while looking the executive dead in the eye. He then brings in a doctor and a shrink who are waiting in the wings. He backhands the doctor, who reels back, slips on the piss, falls to the floor unconscious, and shits himself. He shouts to the unconscious doctor, "The sow is mine!" and "Fuck me, fuck me, fuck me." He then grabs the shrink by the balls and squeezes, and the shrink screams and crumples to the floor and faints in a puddle of piss. After this, he grabs the movie director, who didn't know he was part of the story, and stands him up before the executive. He snaps his neck, and he crumples to the floor in the puddle of piss and shits himself. The man then takes out a crucifix and begins stabbing himself in the dick with it, violently and repeatedly, all while screaming, "Let Jesus fuck you! Let Jesus fuck you!" He is now bleeding from the dick. And the blood is gushing down his leg and onto the piss-soaked carpet. His mother comes in, and he smacks her to the piss-soaked floor, damaging her spine. She screams until she faints, and then shits herself. Meanwhile, the man is stabbing himself in the dick with the bloody crucifix. His gray pants have turned a glossy red-black, resembling an amarina cherry. He begins to vomit, and the vomit shoots out and hits the Hollywood executive in the face. The man continues to stab and vomit and stab and vomit, all while continuing to piss, looking like some nightmarish automated sprinkler system that is leaking at the base. There is so much piss and blood and vomit on the floor that the Hollywood executive can no longer see the man's feet. Then the man's own mother comes in and dies and shits herself. Then two priests come in, and they begin to wade over to the man. But there is so much blood, and piss, and vomit, and shit that they have to hike up their knees to wade through. The old priest has a heart attack and dies on the way, and shits himself. Then the young priest reaches the man who is still stabbing himself in the dick and shouting, "Let Jesus fuck you," through the vomit, which continues to spew unabated from his mouth. The priest punches the man in the face, and they both fall to the floor, writhing and rolling in the piss, and the shit, and the blood, and the vomit, and all the while the priest is punching him, and punching him, and punching him, and there's a detective there for some reason, and then the priest stands up, runs to the window, and launches himself out the window and falls down a flight of steps, all the way down to the busy street below. There is silence in the Hollywood executive's office now. He stands up and finds the man lying sprawled in a puddle of his own blood and piss and vomit. And he says, "That's amazing! What do you call it?" The man gets up from the floor, puts out his hands in a flourish, and says, "The Exorcist."
Well, howdy, folks, and welcome to Minute 79 of the Exorcist Minute, a show where we endeavor to examine, extrapolate, and excavate The Exorcist, minute by terrifying minute. My name is Lester Ryan Clark, and my voice is totally shot.
And I'm Keenan Diaz, and I am embarrassed.
Oh, God. And we'll be your holy... I don't even know. Let me try that again. And we'll be your holy guides on this journey through what some have called the scariest movie of all time. And folks, if you're sitting there wondering what the hell that was, I was, of course, referencing the Aristocrats, which is a legendary joke within the stand-up community where each comic has their own version and it changes every time, and they all try to top each other with how gross and offensive and graphic they can make it. And I don't know, if you take the events of The Exorcist out of context like I just did, it does kind of seem like someone is trying to do an updated version of the Aristocrats joke. And what what better episode? What better minute, folks, to talk about the shock and the horror than this minute right here? This is the minute, folks. This is the minute that everyone has joked about us having to cover. This is the minute we have joked about having to cover. And here we are. 6 months later, we have reached this minute. I don't even know what we do for this one. Do we get silly? Do we try to move past it as fast as we can? This is at once the most shocking and horrible thing to happen in this movie, and also one of the things that makes this movie famous. It's like, how do we approach this? How do we deal with this? Well, apparently, if you're me, you do your best Gilbert Gottfried impersonation, and you make the whole thing a big joke.
Just want to shout out the documentary, The Aristocrats, where they have all these different comedians do their version of it, and they go into a little bit of the history of it. And the best version of The Aristocrats, besides Gilbert Gottfried, which is the most famous, the best one is Wendy Liebman, who is one of my favorite comics. So
yes.
Take a look at hers.
So go check that out. The name of the documentary is The Aristocrats?
The Aristocrats. The Exorcist.
Yeah, we should have a warning at the beginning of this episode.
Yes.
This is a special explicit, very explicit.
Very explicit. The little, I mark this as E for explicit in all of our episodes, but it almost seems as if Keenan and I were talking before we hit the record button. It almost seems as if that one little E isn't enough for this one. It should be EE, like extra explicit, or just like explicit. No, really explicit. Like,
EE, that's my shoe size, actually. So
there we go.
I was wearing wide shoes. This is too much information, I suppose. But I was wearing, like 9.5 wide, right? And then I found out that that's not wide enough. I need double E, which I guess is so wide that the W has to be on its side twice. So I guess it's very common amongst my peoples, my Pacific Islander. We call them surfboard feet.
Wow. Oh, surfboard. I like that, surfboard feet.
Not that I could surf, but yeah.
Wait, am I even allowed to like that? I should.
I give you permission specifically in this instance.
Thank you, Keenan. Thank you, Keenan Diaz. You know what they say about people with EE feet?
They got like surfboards.
They got like surfboards. Yeah. They have much more. No, never mind. I'm not even gonna. Yeah.
I guess we'll talk about The Exorcist today.
Yeah. I guess that is what we do here. We examine, extrapolate, and excavate. But yeah,
3 E's.
The 3 E's. Well, is E. Yeah. In this extra explicit Exorcist Minute. There we go. That should have been our warm extra explicit Exorcist Minute. Extra explicit Exorcist Minute. Yeah. Yep. But yeah. So, So jumping into this minute, our minute begin. Does it even matter? Is anyone out there like, I wonder how the boys are going to react to how Ellen Burstyn closes the door on Lee J. Cobb? That's what I want to know. No, like, okay, actually, on that note, this is a really good time to talk about the history and the evolution of front doors. No.
I want to know, now that you bring it up. When do we start having front doors?
What distractions can we find in this minute that we don't have to talk? This is like as famous as we are for falling into traps. There are no traps that we can fall into in this thing. This is devoid of traps. This is it's like Friedkin went in there and he took out all the doors and windows, and we're just trapped in this room. The Room was a film, but no. But no. So yeah, we got Kinderman promising to come back when Reagan is feeling better, and Chris doesn't really even react to this. If you notice, folks, right? Like at this point, she just wants him out, right? And there's even a little moment when she nods to Kinderman, like, yeah, okay. And then Kinderman passes her and goes to the door. And so he's not looking at her. And you would think that like this is where, Chris makes a face, or she shows us what she really thinks of Kinderman coming back, later. But even then, there's like this, like, nope, no time. Just get him out. Right. Yeah. And that plays across her features. And she nods to Kinderman. She then, when he's not looking, she just keeps on nodding, like maybe to herself, like, nope, just get him out. Right. Like it's
don't
like,
ask him about the history of front doors.
No,
Don't bring him back in. Do you know who invented the Ouija board? Nothing to that.
Yeah. He started telling this joke, like he sounded like Gilbert Gottfried. I was like, yeah. Yes, it's a very funny joke. Yes. Oh, stabbed in the dick. Wow, yeah. Wow. But no, it is like she is holding her breath in this moment, right? Like holding everything in. He could say anything and she wouldn't react. She'd be like, yep, sure. You know, as he makes his way to the door to get out of the house, right? Like so much, like she's so distracted, Keenan. And by contrast, our actor, Ellen Burstyn, is so present in that distraction, right? To answer that question again, right? That she forgets to open the door for her guest. And Kinderman has to do it himself. And if she notices that little, you know, like faux pas that she made, right, she doesn't even care. She doesn't even apologize like, oh, I'm so sorry. My mind was elsewhere thinking about everything you just said. Nope. She just lets it happen. Let's move on. Great. You open the door by yourself. You can see yourself out. Goodbye, detective. Like, I'm holding my breath over everything you just said. I need to breathe goodbye, right? And he finally leaves. Now, folks, remember in the book, actually, he comes back one more time. Can you imagine? After the amazing bit of tense acting that Ellen Burstyn is doing here, she closes the door, locks it, and he knocks again. But that doesn't happen. Instead, she closes the door, locks it, and sort of puts a hand over her mouth. And you can see the true horror of what has happened sort of start to sink in. I say start because it is interrupted, not by Kinderman. It is interrupted in the worst possible way. I'm realizing now, this movie, this demon, is especially evil in that he does not allow people the time or the space to deal with things, to grieve or to process. It happened when Chris and Sharon were denied the time and the space to grieve for Burke. Right. Remember, because Captain Howdy had Reagan spider walk down the stairs.
Yeah, licking Sharon's ankles.
And licking Sharon's ankles, which is like, it. Not only is it like disturbing and inappropriate, like in any given circumstance, but like you just lost like your best friend. And it's like these two, I keep on wanting to say rude, but it's like, and it is rude, but it's like that word doesn't even, it's offensive. It's blasphemous. There we go. It's blasphemous. And that same thing is happening now. It's almost as if it is intentional. It's almost as if the demon knew about the conversation going on downstairs with Kinderman, waited for him to be gone, and then started this whole next thing.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that the filmmakers do really well, Blatty and Owen Roisman, the cinematographer, the editor, and the actors, is that we don't get really a sense in these moments, these dramatic moments, that it is about to get interrupted. Like there's not like a shot that like we could frame Chris where she's in the lower left-hand corner and most of the shot is of the stairs. And we're like, oh, well, this is, that's where I should be paying attention.
What's going to happen with those stairs?
Exactly. Yeah. But sometimes you call it an anticipatory shot, right? So like, okay, we're still doing the last thing, but we're going to make the audience start to think like, okay, there's something else coming, right?
Yeah.
So we're always completely in these moments, which is where I think that some people who watch this with a more modern lens and they're like, this isn't, some people don't think The Exorcist is very scary. I get that a lot. Like younger people are, fans of today's type of horror movies. Because like we have all this drama stuff going on, and we don't also have it like, like even in a movie we might like Hereditary or something, right? The drama is still shot and tinged like it's a horror movie. So we're constantly or like M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, which is a lot of people talking about, really important stuff in their lives about faith and medicine, but they're framed in a way they were like, oh God, at any minute some monster can come out and eat me. Right. But here we're doing the exact opposite. Like this is a straight up drama. Like we're thinking about these people. We're really experiencing with them. And then these shocks happen, out of nowhere, it feels.
Yes. Yeah. And much more so like real life. Right?
Yes,
like,
exactly.
And that's I think that is what gets to me the most. I would be more relieved if there were like some anticipatory angles or shots or like a little bit of music, like just some violins just kind of like thrumming after she closes the door, and it's just like and then like that something's coming, and it's almost like the that anticipatory climbing up the roller coaster, the first part, it's like, oh, we're setting it up, and then we drop, right? But this one is like that rising didn't happen, and it's just like you're coasting. It's like you're not even on a roller coaster. It's like you're on like the teacups, and they suddenly drop, and you're like, I thought I was in the teacups.
Right? What in the?
This is not even supposed. Like it's like you're at Disneyland, and they give you a churro, and then suddenly the floor drops.
Yeah, the churro stand.
It's like I'm not even on a ride.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
and then Mickey Mouse punches you in the dick. But yeah, no. Like, for that reason, Keenan, I appreciate it so much more because it is. Well, I appreciate it, and I don't. I don't like it. I don't like the way it makes me feel. You know? But and maybe that's why I kind of gravitate towards the more, I don't know, showy, maybe like I guess winky types of horror movies that have that music, that have the like dun dun, you know, and they have those anticipatory shots and everything like that. It's like I guess it gives me more of a sense of control, right? It's like the real world is unpredictable and unfair and offensive and blasphemous to my, you know, like to my sensibilities and my ideas of how I perceive things.
Right.
I want but when I'm watching those other types of horror movies, I'm like, yes, this is horrific because it's supposed to be. It's following this formula, and this is the story as it is playing out. And it's like a piece of music or something, right?
Yeah, you know, I had a friend of mine who just said that. Well, you know, like a thriller is a movie where you're having fun by being worried. Right. And a horror movie is when you're having fun by getting scared, you know, like the roller coaster or what have you. Right. And yes, The Exorcist is certainly a horror movie. I don't know if The Exorcist is fun. Right. That's a little bit right. You know what I mean? Like that's a little bit different than what some of these other movies are. This is a Bergman film. Right. This is and you know, we're in conversation with Bergman films and The Exorcist.
Yes, definitely.
So it's not fun.
No. You hear that, listeners? None of this is fun. But no, I mean, we would still call it like a masterful work in that it makes you feel these things,
right?
And it is so close to well, let's say it's closer to these like real life shocks and tragedies that we experience, right?
Yeah, like Jaws, the other, you know, great horror movie from the same time, is fun, right? Like, yes, it's scary, but you don't feel like dread. Like some of the characters, there's only one character in Jaws that you get to know, who dies. I mean, So it's like, okay, that sucks when he gets eaten, but like, you know, it's still a fun movie,
right? Yeah. But yeah, so back to this minute, I want to actually talk a little bit more about Chris's processing of everything that's just gone on before she goes upstairs, or we could say like Ellen Burstyn's processing, Chris's processing, right? It's almost like a self-soothing thing that she's doing, like she's regressed to a much younger age with all of this information, right? So she's still leaning on the door, right? And she takes a deep breath and she sort of rallies and she regroups, and then she turns and she looks, and then she starts walking. And I'm guessing maybe back to the kitchen she's walking, but as she walks, she's got both hands clenched into fists, and they're sort of like drawn close to her, but they're still pointing outward. And we got the right one up and the left one down, and you can see, because they're a little bit apart from her body, especially the right one, you could see that they're shaking. It's like she's trying to hold herself without using her hands. Like her arms want to wrap around her, but her hands stay out and balled into fists. But then that left fist finally comes up, and she sort of like curls them both up in front of her, like she's curling up, like she is curling up smaller and smaller, as if all of the warmth is leaving her body, and she's just trying to hold on to it as the realization starts to sink in. And you'll notice, folks, the next thing starts with that same sound that we've heard, that sound which has haunted us from the beginning of the Washington sequence, that attic sound, that loud clang.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. I hadn't really thought about that till we were listening, again, listening to it bit by bit by bit.
Yeah. So it's that same, it's like the same, I know they don't use sound files, but it's like, it's the exact same sound, right? And so, yes, the next thing we hear is Reagan screaming, "No," followed by another voice shouting, "Do it." Chris runs to the stairs, tries to run up them, is going too fast, stumbles, catches herself, keeps running, all the while Reagan is screaming and this other voice is screaming obscenities, right? Another quick cut here. We're upstairs. Chris is now running towards us, but her eyes are on that door, the door to her daughter's room. Another cut. The door is flung open, and we are met with a scene of pure chaos. So much like the lights going on and off and the phone ringing after he killed Burke. You think this is just like Captain Howdy's power just making all the stuff in the room go crazy?
You know, one of the things that I've been thinking about since you were sort of asking this kind of question is like, I think potentially, I think you're sort of converting me, Lester, to to everything Captain Howdy is doing is on purpose. He is in control of this. Like, he wants Chris to come up here. Like, he wants Reagan to get caught. So like he's controlling Reagan in such a way that like, why would she call out, right, and say no or anything? Yeah. So I think that it's all controlled. So that's not really Reagan doing that. It's Captain Howdy controlling Reagan. And yeah, I'm completely sold on this idea now, thanks to you. And yeah, it's interesting. We get all these records flying about and everything going. And I don't know. I think he's purposely making it more chaotic than it probably needs to be. Right.
Right. Yeah.
It's like she comes in and it's the perfect moment. She comes in at the right moment as everything is flying about.
Yeah.
So she doesn't come in and everything is already broken from this swirl of wind and energy or whatever. She comes in just when it's as if he's like waiting behind, like, okay, 3, 2, 1.
Precisely. Yes, exactly. This is, I mean, and folks, this is like another level of evil. I mean, we're talking about a demon here, but, and this kind of goes into what I'm going to talk about more a little bit later about how, I personally don't think that Reagan is Captain Howdy's target. And this was all kind of meant to, you're right, Keenan, this was meant to hurt Chris as well. He's waiting to show this to Chris. Because if he wanted to do it like silently, he could have done that silently. Right.
Exactly.
Like but no, this is all for the, well, I guess what's the opposite of benefit? This is for Chris's pain as well as Reagan's pain.
Right.
This is to cause as much hurt as possible. And yeah, like you said, it's a lot of stuff flying through the air. I notice now we see a lot of records, and that hit differently this time. Like, how many times have you seen a poltergeist movie where a bunch of things are flying around the room, and it's scary because a bunch of things are flying around the room, and you don't realize, like, wait, those are her things. Like that record that flung up against the window is something that she listened to. That's her property, right? And this, again, like other movies, they use this effect to sort of show off the abilities of the ghost, right? It's like this creative spook show, like, ooh, look what I can do, right? Like I'm thinking specifically of Poltergeist, where, like, if I'm not mistaken, a light bulb is like screwed into a lamp in midair, and a record is playing via like the needle of one of those little compass drawing tools, right? And then like an action figure flies by riding a toy horse, right? It's like spooky charming, right? It's like the ghosts are playing with the toys. But this scene is so different contextually. Like, we're not supposed to be impressed by this.
Yeah, exactly. It's even hard for us to look at one particular thing. So it'd be hard for us in this scene to we have to describe it as a storm, right? Of a bunch of things happening. And yeah, there are records and books, but it's not like we're focusing on the powers of one particular dainty little dance, right? Like in Poltergeist.
Right. Yeah.
And obviously there are other scenes in Poltergeist that are crazier like this near the end. But
yes. And Poltergeist gets scary as well.
Yes.
But like this moment specifically in Poltergeist is, like, I would say that this moment in Exorcist is like the opposite side of that coin.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And I got to remember that you said the word storm. I want to bring that back for this specific scene. Yeah. But for just a second, little thought experiment here, Keenan. Let's take Captain Howdy out of the equation. And let's say that Chris heard her daughter screaming upstairs. She runs up and she opens the door to see a man. Just a man.
Mm-hmm.
And he has destroyed this little girl's room, destroyed her daughter's room, all of her things, all of her toys, her clothes, while Reagan is screaming and crying and cowering in the corner. And now he's going after her.
Mm-hmm.
This is a nightmare.
Right.
This is a nightmare that any parent would have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if there was no demon in this story. This was just a family drama, and this was Howard.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like before the divorce, he's still living with them, and he's this like volatile, unpredictable presence in their house, and you never know what he's going to do or how he's going to react, what's going to set him off. You just got done talking with the police downstairs. You close the door, and then you hear this, and you go up and you see this, or like not even Howard, just a random person, like a living, breathing person with blood in their veins that has gotten into your house somehow. If I remember correctly, like in The Shining, isn't that like what someone suggests after Danny says the ghost lady in the bathtub tried to strangle him?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's either Wendy or Jack who says it might be a crazy person sharing the hotel with them. I think in like
Wendy's like we got to go and look for this person out there. It's not a ghost, it's somebody out there, and we have to. Yeah,
it's a crazy person, right? Like I think in the Kubrick version, Wendy says there's a crazy person in the hotel with us, and I think also in the book, Jack is the one who like tries to calm them down by saying, oh, because Danny says it's a ghost, and Jack is like, oh no, it's probably just a disgruntled employee who's like hiding out in one of the rooms. Right. And Wendy's like, Jack, that's not better. Like that's just as bad, maybe even worse. And ever since then, like it got me thinking, Keenan, let's paint a picture here. Like you're wandering around, an old abandoned house, and you hear a noise upstairs. Would you rather that be a ghost or a crazy person in there with you?
Oh, geez. Well, it's
if you had to choose,
am I a ghost hunter? Do I have?
You just decided. Okay, because I actually used to do this in Japan. Like me and my buddies would get together because there's a lot of just like abandoned buildings in Japan, like especially out in the countryside, right? Like we found like schools and apartment complexes and hospitals and stuff like that. And one of the hobbies that people would do, they would do this like urbex thing. I guess that's what's called in America urbex. Right?
Urban exploration.
Like and just exploring like abandoned places and stuff like that. And me and a bunch of friends, like we would wander through these places. And imagine you're on an urbex trip with me. Right. Imagine you're just like exploring an old, house that I found. Right. And it's been abandoned for years and years and years. And it's like it's condemned. We're not even supposed to be there. And we're downstairs and we're wandering through the foyer, and we hear something upstairs. We hear what is obviously like somebody walking around, and maybe we hear a door close or something like that. And we look at each other. Would you rather we have stumbled upon a haunted house, or, oh shit, there's like some crazy person who's taken up residence upstairs?
I think a haunted house.
Right?
Yes. Because like, again, it's like a fun, it's like the fun of horror versus the reality, of real life. Like, we never think we're going to die in the horror movie, I suppose. Right. And like, oh, it's a ghost and there's rules and like they let us live or whatever. Why would a ghost kill us? And then, so that we wouldn't be able to tell anyone there's a ghost in there. Right.
Right. For some reason, a ghost just seems less dangerous.
It just wants to spook you. Just there to scare you a little bit.
And then we do the and then we do that Scooby-Doo running, and then we
down all the different doors down the one long hallway.
And then we leave a Lester and Keenan shaped hole in the front door, right? And then that's it, right? And then both of us eat like a 3-foot tall sandwich,
right?
Yeah. But that no. Like in all seriousness, like a real person would scare me even more, right? A real person with this doing the same things. And I think that's, I don't know why that is, but it like just the idea that a person has these kind of like violent, malevolent tendencies rather than a ghost. It just, I don't know why. I guess the existence of a ghost or the existence of a demon, sort of implies that there's some kind of like lattice work of like, spiritual law that is going on, and the presence of a person tells me nothing.
Right.
Yeah,
that's what I was saying. Like, are we ghost hunters in this? Like if you believe that you have the power over ghosts are not as scary. If you believe if you believe in God or an afterlife, ghosts aren't as scary. There's some rules to how to get rid of them or what we have to do.
Yeah, or even not necessarily having power over ghosts, but just like ghosts by their very existence seems to imply that like there's some kind of like there's hidden blueprints that we're not privy to,
right?
And there's rules that they follow or something like that, right?
Right.
They can't exist beyond the confines of this haunted house or
right.
Whatever, right? Yeah,
right.
And yeah, so folks, to get back to what is happening in this scene in this movie, like I'm not saying what's happening here in this movie isn't horrific enough, right? Like this is absolutely horrendous, right? This is the worst thing in the movie. Right? Mm-hmm. Like this is the minute that nobody wanted to guest on. And if they did, we would cut all contact with them. This is hard to watch. This is hard to talk about. Like it's hard for us to even get silly in this episode because it's like the weight of the idea of this thing is just too much. I almost feel bad for doing this episode. I actually thought about like just skipping it.
Just skipping. This is the minute you don't.
This is the minute you've never heard. Yeah. And the reason I brought up the thing with The Shining, right? The fact that like maybe a real person is a little bit scarier than a ghost, even though they're doing the same thing. I feel like the supernatural element here in this scene in The Exorcist distracts us from what this really is, and what this is rape.
Mm-hmm.
Like ironically, the fact that it's a demon somehow like not lessens it,
right?
But puts it in the realm of unreality.
Mm-hmm.
This fantastical element distracts us from the actual horror of it. And that's why I said, Keenan, like thought experiment, this isn't Captain Howdy, this is Howard.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And suddenly it's 1,000 times like both of them are horrible. You know what I mean?
Right,
but like it hits really, really differently, right? And that supernatural distraction is a tale as old as time, right? Like Captain Hook is less scary than Mr. Darling.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
That's a safe way that we get to explore what it is to be a child, a young girl who's turning into a woman, and your father is worried about your newfound adulthood and womanhood. Right.
Right. Yes.
So we'll have Captain Hook do it.
We'll have Captain Hook be the baddie, and he'll look bad, and he'll sound bad, and he'll say bad things, and he'll have a fucking hook for a hand, right?
But he's going to sound a lot like your dad and look a lot like your dad.
Yeah.
And if people don't know, so the tradition in the original stage plays, and I think most people still do this when they put on Captain Hook or they put on Peter Pan, is that Captain Hook and Mr. Darling are played by the same actor. And that was done in the Disney version as well, with Hans Conried playing both parts. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Captain Hook, less scary than Mr. Darling. Elmira Gulch is in some ways scarier than the Wicked Witch of the West, right? Played by Margaret Hamilton, right? Jack Torrance is worse than all of the ghosts in the hotel.
Right.
Like all of them combined. And that's actually a perfect example right there, right? Stephen King's Shining, his book, has Jack as a loving father who is possessed by the hotel. And King goes to great lengths to let you know that Jack is fighting with the hotel and that the ghosts are real and that they're messing with this family. Stanley Kubrick doesn't give two shits about that. He makes sure that in this movie about a haunted hotel, the scariest thing is the father. To the point where the ghosts sort of seem ambiguous at times.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the big difference between Stanley Kubrick's The Shining and Stephen King's The Shining. Both of them amazing works of art in their own right. But one of them very, very much like grounded in this reality of like Jack Torrance is the monster. Right? It's not the ghosts.
So here, that's really interesting. You know, I'm glad that you said that. That might be really disturbing to listeners, but to think of this as a rape scene, like I had not been thinking about it in those terms, but of course you're right. Like this is how we can deal with this, properly, right? It's a feminist movie. It's about women's issues, right? And so few movies of the time, as we talked about before, are like dealing with women's issues like that are happening in real life. There are, it takes until the late 70s before we have movies that are like what we think of as like non-genre, again, so like drama or whatever term you want to use for it, that are about like the women's liberation movement, right?
Yeah,
they're in genre movies like this, So we have The Exorcist, Alien, etc., right? And rom-coms and all sorts of things. And that's what we're dealing with, or like Network, right? Which is like the satire about television, but it's really about women's. It's about a lot of things, but a large part of it is also about like women's issues, right? So like, we can't deal with sexual violence, directly. That is hard for people to, maybe people want to make movies like that. Artists want to express themselves, but audiences don't necessarily want to. It's not as safe as you were saying, right?
Right.
So like Alien is about rape. It is about like making men experience what it is to be a woman who is being sexually violated. Right. That, again, amongst many other things. And that's what Alien is about, right?
Like, and with Alien, right, it is also like empowering women, right? Because we have Ripley fighting the monster and defeating the monster in the end, right? And while not overly explicit with all of this stuff, it's still a little bit more explicit than what's going on here with The Exorcist. And you can kind of see it. You can say, okay, yeah, the alien is phallic shaped, and the face hugger looks like a vagina, and all of this stuff, and Ripley is the woman who kills the the giant dick monster, and and all of this, right? So you can very easily like put the pieces together. But this movie hides it so insidiously, and but like to the point where like people joke about this scene. It's like, oh yeah, The Exorcist. Oh yeah, that's the one where the girl in the crucifix, right? Like it's
well,
notorious, not famous, right? Like for this scene.
So I'm really glad you put it, because even I had not really thought about it in those terms until you said it here on the show. And
it's because it's hidden so well.
Yeah. And there's another movie, famous at about the same time called Deliverance. You know Deliverance?
I don't know.
So Deliverance is about these city folks if they're from Atlanta, and they go on a whitewater rafting tour. Because the dam they're gonna build a dam and the river's gonna be gone. So like, we gotta go prove that we're men out there, and it's Burt Reynolds. And he sort of leads the team, and they get kidnapped by hillbilly, like backwoods hick people. And one of them gets raped. It's a very, very famous scene. And like, so that's explicitly, a rape scene, and that is an incredibly disturbing movie. And then the way that culture deals with that, right, is to make jokes about it. So so the famous thing is, and again, like I'm guilty of it too, right? So because it's such a shocking scene. So it's like, so the guy says, "Squeal like a piggy for me." So he goes, "Squeal, piggy, squeal."
That's where that comes from.
Exactly. So that's like from an actual rape scene in a real movie, explicitly about rape. But that's how we deal with that. That's how we get ourselves distance away from that, is to because like people who see it are so shocked by it that like, geez, we do impressions
and laughter,
of it.
Precisely, and that's, I mean, it's been said, on other shows and other platforms before, but laughter doesn't necessarily mean like you're amused by something. It can be a way of coping and like just being like so shocked that you don't know what else to do. Right. But yeah, like no, I wondered even about like bringing this up for this movie because it is just so it's so hard to talk about. But like there's a point to be made there. Like if you take out the demon and you make this Howard and keep everything else the same, it would hit a lot differently. And I don't think people would. I think people would turn away from the entire movie from that. Right.
And then they wouldn't be as susceptible to the same ideas and messages about like womanhood and girlhood and violation and and I mean we have a house full of women, with KARL essentially, right? We have a house full of women, and they're on their own, and they are trying to marry Tyler Moore. They're trying to make their way out there, right? But then we have these masculine forces that don't want to do that, right? I mean, but we get to explore all of that in the confines of a ghost story.
Whew. So back to this minute here. We cut back to Chris just as we hear that voice. Even though we have heard this voice before, it is still harsh and jarring, right? We have two women in the room. One of them is a little girl, and the voice we hear, while also a woman's, come to find, Mercedes McCambridge, we know that it's not coming from either of them. It's not Chris's voice. It's not Reagan's voice. And it is shouting in that ugly way that can be like triggering for some people. Like no matter what it is saying, there is a way that people shout in movies and there's a way that people whisper in movies or laugh or cry, but especially shouting. There's this way that people shout in film that is almost operatic, right? As real as it is, as real as it can be at times, it's for the scene. And Mercedes McCambridge shouts like this in other scenes. But if you've ever been in a real life shouting match, if you've ever witnessed a domestic fight or an incident where someone like loses it in public, when they shout, they do it with no care for their own voice, for their own vocal like instruments, right? That's what's going on, right? So again, even without the supernatural element, it can be really, really triggering, right? Like it's this shouting that kind of is you can hear the instrument breaking, right? Yeah. So this voice is screaming, "Let Jesus fuck you," as we hold on Chris. She's got her hands pressed to her face, over her mouth, eyes wide as if she cannot believe what she is seeing. And before we can think, before we can breathe, we cut to a close-up of Reagan's hand clutching a bloody crucifix. This is the same crucifix that was found under her pillow. As Keenan pointed out, the last we saw of it was when Chris put it down on that little table after interrogating Sharon, Willie, and KARL, and before getting interrogated herself by Detective Kinderman. Again, this shot is so quick, just enough to realize what it is before the hand goes down and out of frame. The next shot is, again, very quick, but very clear. The cross comes down in between Reagan's legs, and we have confirmation that this is not Linda Blair in this shot. This is Eileen Dietz. She stabs herself between the legs, and then up goes the cross again. And this next shot, the one of Linda Blair's face, we're back with Linda Blair again, is the one I want to linger on. It's the technical stuff that's going to get me through this, because this is probably the most mentally and emotionally distressing scenes. For both actors and audience. So I'm focusing on cinematography right now. I'm focusing on performance, and this performance, this face that Linda Blair is giving us is terrifying and heartbreaking and complex all at the same time. If you asked me, what does someone being possessed look like? What does it look like to have two entirely separate personalities fighting for control of your facial features? What does it look like? Turns out it looks like this. Like, on first glance, it looks like the demon has total control. Her lips are drawn back in this sort of snarl. Her brows are furrowed. But then you can also see in those eyes, which are terrifying, they are also terrified. It's almost like one of those magic eye posters, like, or those visual trick images you see on TikTok where they drain the color from like an image, but your brain still tells you that the apple is green or whatever, right? And so for this image, right, like you look at those eyes, you look at Linda Blair's eyes, and if someone says that's the demon, then you see the demon. You see this snarling face, right? You see these evil, hate-filled eyes. But if you look at it and someone says Reagan is pleading with the demon right now, she is afraid and she is pleading with him to stop, you can see that in those eyes too. How can this be? It takes a phenomenally strong actor to be able to hold both of those things, not just in your mind, but then also have them show on your face. And Linda Blair is doing that right here. And folks, let us not forget that Linda Blair is saying all of these things. We don't hear her saying them because her voice has been dubbed over by Mercedes McCambridge, of course. But she had to fully embody and fully act out this part before the dubbing occurred.
Yeah,
we just don't hear
she's
it.
not like, they're not having her mouth it or something.
No,
like,
no.
oh, we couldn't possibly have you little girl say these things. Just mouth it. No, she has to do it. Yeah.
She's not saying peas and carrots, peas and carrots, peas and carrots.
Yeah. The one that's going around TikTok most recently, like, I'm not on TikTok, so I only hear them from you. Someone has to text me a TikTok. Is the scene from Toy Story 3, where depending on whether you want to hear it as Ken, Michael Keaton's character, saying, "Oh, Barbie," or "Oh, fuck me," you hear it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it really is weird what your mind can do in those types of things. Yeah, and you can see both of them. But she has to completely convey all of this. She has to be the one who's stabbing and the one who's being stabbed, which is quite something.
Yeah. So if there was ever any question about Linda Blair's ability to perform, like, let them be laid to rest. And yeah, so I wanted to bring that up in this minute because I think we all know this is a very talked about scene when it comes to the question of like, well, how much did Linda Blair actually do versus Eileen Dietz and versus Mercedes McCambridge and right, like, and I think because of the crediting, or I guess the miscrediting snafu that occurred with this role, this is one of the scenes that kind of like gets dragged out as an example of like, look how little Linda Blair actually did versus these other two ladies, right? Like, and it's one of those go-to scenes when you try to make an argument that she didn't do as much for obvious reasons. You're not going to make a child do all of this by herself. But what I'm saying is that kind of talk very easily slips into, well, she didn't actually do anything in this scene, which is just not true.
That she didn't know what the scene was about even. And they hid that from her. And we have a lot of evidence that's not the case, that she understood what this was.
Yeah. She's not like a trained animal that is like doing things like on command, right? Like she knew, like she is an actor, right?
Yeah, she heard about the book. She heard that it was the scene where the little girl masturbates with the crucifix, and she said, "Let's do it," because I'm an actor. Yeah. And she did the work that she was supposed to do, right?
Yeah. She read the book, and this we get from both Friedkin and Blair, saying that she read the book beforehand. And according to Friedkin, they had that conversation in the office about like, hey, there's the scene coming up that's going to happen. And it's like, do you know what this is? Do you know? Do you feel comfortable with it and all that stuff?
She's like, yeah, I get it. I'm an actor.
Right. This is my job.
Yeah. Movie making is a team. Every once in a while you get an actor who. And I understand why they don't do this very often, because you as the audience member want to think it's the actor doing everything. So it can sometimes, so I get why an actor would sometimes be like, well, if I over explain like who does everything for me, like I have a stand-in. Every actor has a stand-in,
right.
In addition to a stunt double, right? And there's the makeup team and a vocal coach and all this stuff. And like sometimes I understand why they don't say like, oh, it wasn't just me, it was this whole thing, because that's the illusion, is we're trying to we're trying to present to the audience that we're all one person. But filmmaking is a team, and there are these 4 or 5 women, depending on how we're counting, who are playing Reagan, plus Dick Smith, the makeup artist, and then plus the costume designer and the hair and makeup people, who are 2 separate people. Like it's a whole thing to make a character.
Right. Yes. And I wonder if Friedkin had just been like a little bit more upfront about that, then this whole mess wouldn't have erupted the way it did. Because once you try to hide that and then you get caught, then suddenly, people are like, well, what else are you keeping from us?
Yeah.
Right? Like you told us that Linda Blair did everything, and now we're finding out that she was part of this team. And like in people's mind, that equates to, well, she didn't do everything equals she didn't do anything.
Well, in Friedkin, this is that part of 1970s filmmaking where it's the auteur, right? The director as the god, the director as the main artist, and the directors that we tend to like from this period, or the ones that are presented as the best epitome of what a director is, are the one who is a producer and a writer, and the story is autobiographical in some way. And so that is, that downplays the collaborative nature of cinema. So, like you said, it's Stanley Kubrick, who, to be fair, Stanley Kubrick on The Shining did write and produce and direct the movie,
right?
But like we, to say William Friedkin's The Exorcist, right? That's true and not true, right?
Right.
The director is the most important filmmaker for sure, like by far. But like we got into this place in the 1970s in America where it was like the director is the only one, and everything flows out of them with their vision with the capital V. So this conversation about Linda Blair's performance is partially, I think, an artifact of like Oscar nomination nonsense, or like trying to award one person for a performance when a performance is, also the editor and also, all sorts of things, right? So that's just an artifact of that. And I think also part of this, like, this other artifact of like the auteur era of like trying to give people, trying to break down in layman's term where the credit lies for a film, when a film is the most complicated art form that had ever existed up at this time.
Right. Yeah. So speaking to all of that, folks, right, and to this scene, we have Linda Blair's voice. We got this terrifying close-up of her face playing 2 characters at the same time. And in the fight between Chris and Reagan that's coming up, I'd say we have just as many shots of Linda Blair from the front as we do from the back, where it's, definitely Eileen Dietz. So actually, speaking of these shots in this fight, Chris up to this point has been paralyzed with fear, right? She's standing in the doorway watching all of this. Now she regains control and she runs over to rescue her daughter. Again, folks, maybe this is obvious to everyone else, but I was struck again by the fact that Chris doesn't just turn around and run out of the room. Like we haven't mentioned, Keenan, KARL is on the floor in the room. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, what do you mean KARL's on the we have to
Yes, we have to okay, we have to what is this preface? We have to yeah. I guess okay.
That's
I guess
quite
we
a
have
bomb
to
that you just dropped there, Lester.
I just dropped a bomb and I was just gonna just skip past it. But no. Okay, we have to explain ourselves.
He's not waiting for his turn in the bathroom like he was before.
He waited too long and he just collapsed.
In a puddle of piss.
Oh God, anything to get me through this. But no. So our good friend over at Exorcist Reviews, the YouTube channel that we mentioned before, and I'll link him in the show notes again for this. He brought to our attention that KARL is in fact unconscious on the floor in the room right now, and that's supposed to be a little nod to the book. And I do remember this from the book. When Chris first hears the ruckus downstairs, she thinks it's KARL shouting at Reagan, maybe doing something to Reagan.
Because it's a masculine voice, right? That's what the book and the screenplay keep calling it a man's voice or a
man's voice, right? Yeah. And like who else could that be, right? Because Kinderman just left, so
Burke's dead.
Yeah, and Burke's dead. Bye, Burke. And if it were Burke's voice, it's like, well, you just
do it. Just do it for me.
Yeah, just do it. Come on, my darling. Jesus fuck. No, I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna keep that in. Oh, Burke. But yeah, and he speaks in Burke's voice anyway later on. So yeah. But so she thinks it's KARL, and so she climbs the stairs and she realizes no, it's not KARL's voice, it's another deeper voice that she's never heard before. And then she gets in there and she sees Reagan on the bed, talking in two voices, and KARL. And this is the book, folks. KARL is knocked out on the floor. So there's this idea that when the demon first started attacking Reagan, KARL was in there and he was trying to help her. And the demon just smacked him and knocked him out. And so maybe one of those like loud bellows was KARL.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's like, what are you doing? Stop, right. And the demon just like, bam,
right.
Smacks him. And that's one of the theories of how the crucifix got back up there as well. I still think it's Captain Howdy who did it. Again, just to mess with everybody in the family. Again, the same reason that he's like waiting to show Chris like what he's doing to her daughter, right? It's all for the pain of both Chris and Reagan. So KARL was up there trying to save Reagan and the demon knocked him out. And then Chris comes up there, sees her daughter acting crazy, sees that she knocked KARL unconscious, this big, strong man. And that's what I was getting at, folks. Mom, after seeing all of this, runs into the room. She runs to her daughter to rescue her. She is not repulsed by this. She is not repelled by this, right? She sees her big, strong butler lying on the floor from this demon smack, and she still runs in there.
Right. So we'll come back to that in the next minute where we actually have some film evidence that KARL is there, and that's thanks to our Exorcist Reviews friend, but we'll come back to it. Yeah, so we're not crazy.
No.
Well, we are.
Yes. We got to preface that as well.
As you see at the beginning of this episode and continue on until today. Yeah. But but we will. Yeah, there is some evidence in the film that KARL is in fact on the floor.
Yes. And so that might have been a something that ended up on the cutting room floor. Yes. It is certainly in there in the book. But yeah, so we'll talk about that in the next minute. Right. But yeah, so in this minute, right, Chris runs in there and tries to get this cross out of Reagan's hand. And you can see in this shot where it's Linda and we can see her face again. It is fucking scary. These eyes are these contacts making her eyes look darker, like more black? Or is this just Linda Blair's regular eyes? Like she has brown eyes regularly. Right. I checked, but like,
I think so. This shot is so fast, but I believe that's what's going on there. I believe that, in addition to this makeup, this mask that we have on her, this, she's wearing, like a prosthetic sort of makeup job, like somewhere between like a full prosthetic and just, powder makeup. It's something in between.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, I believe that it is contacts, because it is quite dark, quite scary.
Yeah. It's like a shark's eyes.
Yes.
Like it is very animalistic. Like an animal that like you would call a killing machine.
Right.
Very, very scary.
My friend Zach Bolio has very dark eyes, and he, my mother works at the DMV, and she said I have pretty dark eyes, and it's, you can say black hair, but you have to say brown eyes. There are no black eyes,
Right.
But my friend Zach Bolio somehow convinced the DMV to let him say he has black eyes.
Oh,
so
really?
It says brown. So maybe just confused them or something, because he has brown hair, black eyes on his driver's license. So he'll show that off as like proof from the government that he's really badass.
But these eyes, okay, I'm glad you said that, because these eyes, Keenan, these are black, right? And they are filled with this like malicious glee. And if she wasn't using contacts, that's even more of an accomplishment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like to make those regular eyes look like that, right? The demon is just so happy that mom has come to try to rescue her daughter, right? This fight ensues with Chris shouting, "Give it to me." And then the demon grabs her head and forces her down into her daughter's crotch and screams, "Lick me, lick me." And again, we don't see anything. We only have this close-up of Reagan's face. And again, folks, I was actually wondering at this point if maybe this was a mask.
Yeah.
You said mask, Keenan.
Yeah, it's something like that. I don't know if that's the right makeup term, but yeah.
I was like, could this maybe be Eileen Dietz here wearing a Linda Blair mask?
No, I don't think so. I think that would be too complicated. This is clearly Linda Blair, but
okay, all right, and like God, the effects people here had me like really wondering if this weren't like a full on Halloween rubber Linda Blair mask, like as realistic as like the dummy we're going to see in a few shots from now. And the reason I thought this was a mask, folks, was because like all during this struggle, Linda's eyes, like this is like her eyes look dead. It's so chilling. Like, remember at the beginning of this minute, we had her eyes looking like there were two people behind them, right? And I'm realizing I keep talking about her eyes, right? Then we got these like gleeful, malevolent eyes when mom runs in to help. And now we got eyes that are so empty and dead, it actually took me out of the movie to wonder if maybe this was like a rubber mask, right? And then, folks, the last frame of this shot, where we linger on that hideous face and it transforms into a snarl. And then I'm like, oh yeah, it's definitely not a rubber mask.
Exactly.
Her lips are pulled back and you can see all the teeth. The eyes are bulging out of her face. It looks like she's doing an impression of it. It looks like Captain Howdy. Captain Howdy has fully materialized in this little girl and is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, not a hidden Howdy.
That is an E for explicit Howdy.
Right, exactly.
And that's what I wanted to focus on here, folks. Like in the midst of this horrendous scene with horrendous real life implications, I want us all to note that Linda Blair got up that day. She came to set knowing that probably just the scene itself was going to be enough to scare people, right? Like having talked to Friedkin, knowing that it was going to be confusing and chaotic and people were going to be more scared by the idea of the scene itself, just like the self-mutilation aspect and the blasphemy aspect, back in that time was going to be enough. And Linda knew all of that and she said, no. I'm going to scare them. They're going to be scared because of me. And she did it. Every shot that is trained on her face, she is giving us 200%. That's 100% for Reagan and 100% for Captain Howdy. There is no Linda Blair here, to the point where she actually fooled me into thinking this was another actor wearing a rubber mask. Like, that is the work of an actor. And this scene, just the craziness of this scene, the brutality and the grossness of this scene distracts us from what I think is a chilling performance. But actually, okay, so that is all of my notes for this scene. But Keenan, I wanted to talk about two more things here. Firstly, I think I remember anecdotally that this was one of the first moments when Friedkin and Blatty kind of butted heads about something. And I think this was the idea that Blatty wanted the masturbation scene to be a little bit more implied. He didn't want it to be too graphic. He wanted it to be more like you don't really see anything. It's just kind of like the implication of this horrible, blasphemous act. And Friedkin was like, nope, I am going to close up on it. I'm going to make it bloody. I'm going to put it in everybody's face. I'm going to make it like as graphic and gross as possible. And I think that was one of the kind of like arguments they had.
Now, for you, where did we end up? Is this more the Blatty side or the Friedkin side?
Oh, what we're seeing in the film?
Yeah.
It is definitely more the Friedkin side, and I'm actually thankful.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because, and folks, before you misunderstand, right?
Shut this podcast off.
No, because the book, if you can believe me, is worse. The book is worse because, and this goes back to what we were talking about with the desecration of the Mary statue. The book makes it more sexual and less gory.
Yeah, because we described this as a masturbation scene, and I don't know.
Which in this movie, it is not.
It is. I would not call this a masturbation scene in the movie.
I would say it's a self-mutilation. This is a stabbing self-mutilation scene.
Yes, and it is done in a sexual way that is, repulsive, but this is not like a self-gratifying thing at all.
No,
right?
No.
So I think it's fair to say it's rape without saying it's masturbation, right?
Yeah.
So all of that, and it's the sounds of it are like, mutilation is the right word. The sounds they add are disgusting, stabbing, right?
Yeah, it involves the bodily areas of a masturbation scene, but that's it. Right? Like this is she could be stabbing herself in the leg. She could be stabbing herself in the stomach, right? Which in reality it's Eileen Dietz stabbing like a bloody sponge in between her knees or something. Right. So it's not well, did you know, folks, there's nothing real about this?
Yeah, but that brings me up to what I want to talk about in the script.
Oh, wait. Can I say, so, but I bring that up because Keenan, in the book, like Captain Howdy actually like croons with pleasure.
Right.
It's much more disturbing because that scene you can actually call a masturbation scene. This is much more like mutilation, and that's why I'm saying like I would not be doing a movies by minute thing of this movie if they kept it the way that Blatty wanted it. In the same way that they wanted to paint the Virgin Mary like with boobs and a dick or something and make it more sexual. And Friedkin seems to have, I don't know if he did this intentionally or not, but by adding more blood and gore and grossness to it, he puts it more into the realm of horror and shock and like ooh, this is gross. This is Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, stuff versus like what it could have been, which would have been way more disturbing.
Right. Well, I want to look at what we have in our script, which again is from December of '72, so early on in the production of this version that we have here. But no, it does say, I don't want to read word for word, but I think it's interesting that the three times it's mentioned that the crucifix is going to be stabbing or going into the vagina or what have you, Blatty is very clear. He sort of breaks the typical mode that you have in a screenplay where you're just sort of flowing along and you're seeing the movie as you're reading. He takes us out of that. And so he says, yada, yada, yada. I'm trying to yada, yada over some of the terrible stuff here.
Which this is all like, folks, if you're wondering, it's like, hey, why is there no reading from the Book of Blatty in this episode? Why do you think? Take a guess. And then so Keenan, the book and the screenplay are available online if you want to go check that out.
But this says, as the crucifix is plunged down and out of sight, underlined, out of sight at Reagan's vagina. So that's not necessarily how most screenplays are written. Where
it might as well be like out of sight, Billy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The demonic face looks down and we hear all caps, Reagan demon roaring. So again, we don't want to see it. Okay. A little bit further on. Chris has raced in screaming, grappling to take hold of the crucifix. We see blood on Reagan's thighs, but never the vagina. All caps, never the vagina. So he's being really clear what we're not supposed to be seeing here. And so, Yeah, occasionally a screenplay will say "we see" or "we hear" when it's clear, like we see things that the characters don't see. Right, that's a really useful thing. And then sometimes, you call out point of view shot. This is the 70s, so there were a little bit more things like we have here, moving shot or point of the camera. But yeah, even within that mode of it, like describing what we do not see and what that is that's very atypical for screenplay style of the time. And then we do get a little bit later, as she crawls closer, Reagan now has her back to the camera looking down, and we know the crucifix is being used for masturbation. He misspells masturbation, but that's going to happen. Yeah. He's got other things on his mind.
Yeah.
This is Blatty. But yeah, there's a little typo there. But yeah, so he's very, very clear about like, okay, we're looking over the shoulder, what we're not seeing. He doesn't want I think he doesn't even want to get caught like having anybody, when I read your script, I guess I misunderstood that this was going to happen this way. That we would do this. I was just, following your instructions, Bill, and this is what you wanted, right? So it's incredibly, incredibly clear what he says here.
Interesting. Well, dang. Okay. Well, now I don't know how to feel about Blatty, because I thought you were going to read the screenplay and it was going to be exactly like the book, which is really, really hard to read at that part. Like to the point where, like, I mean, you know that Captain Howdy calls her all of these horrible things throughout the book.
Right.
That's the only scene where he calls her something nice, and it's so bad. Yeah, it's so bad, and it's like not even nice, but like it's a term of endearment that is. And that makes it so much worse.
Are you trying not to say it, or do you remember what it says? I have a version of this in the script here.
He calls her, I can't remember, like my sweet, my pearl, something like that.
Yeah, in the screenplay it says here, there's my pearl, my sweet honey piglet.
Oh, God.
yeah.
But it's like thinking of like all that. It's like you bitch, you pig, you sow, right? Like you cunting this, you blah blah,
right.
And somehow that's less stomach churning than like when he's doing this scene and he's calling her like pet names.
Yeah,
it's like
right.
Yeah. But again, it's man, I don't know. Like I'm like both options seem horrible,
right?
Because it's like, so Blatty wrote that. That's in the book, but then he's like so explicit about like, now when we do the movie, none of this is going to be, like seen. So it's like, well, geez, like who do I be mad at? Because like then Friedkin's like, nope, I'm gonna put it all out on the screen. But then it's like, well, yeah, but actually, it's like it's still not as bad as Blatty's book, right?
Yeah.
But at least we know that like when Blatty was making the screenplay, he's like, it's like let's what's the word? Like let's
go full hog.
No, in the screenplay, I mean.
Just trying to.
Oh, right, got it. Because the pig stuff. Well, let's not go full hog. Let's have everything be implied, right? Yeah. Oh yeah. But yeah, I guess I wanted to check in with you and see if you had heard anything about like them arguing back and forth about this scene.
Yeah, you had a more detailed version than I had. So
okay, all right, yeah. And then the second thing I wanted to check in with you about is, so in interviews, Blatty admitted that this scene came to his mind because he was trying to think of the he was trying to think of like the worst, most blasphemous, most horrible thing imaginable. And in the 1970s, in Catholic 1970s, that was doing that with the crucifix.
Right.
So I've seen the first season of the TV show, the Exorcist TV show. And this instance is called back in the TV show, except I guess for modern sensibilities, it's used with a hot curling iron.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And I was thinking, it's like, well, yeah, because, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is how much of this like shock and horror is the fact that it's a crucifix versus how much of the shock and horror is the fact that like she's stabbing herself with anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. It has to be both. Right.
Yeah. Right. But like today, if it was a crucifix, like that wouldn't, I don't know, like the fact that they changed it to a hot curling iron instead kind of says that like the blasphemous element is at least waning these days.
Right.
You know
That's
what
a
I
really
mean?
good indicator. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like just as like disturbing, and it's like the fact that it's like this demon making this girl do this to herself, and it's a hot curling iron. That's
You know what might also be is that like it's like the horror of everyday things, right? So a crucifix in the set, you're probably more likely in a house to be in a household with the crucifix in 1973, right? I don't have any in my house, right? You might have some in your house, but a curling iron, everybody has that lying around, right?
And the fact that so the fact that it's not like a curved ceremonial sacrifice knife or something like that.
Yeah. It's like, oh God, I could be compelled. I'm answering the call of the void and picking up something in my house that's terrible and doing that to myself. The new Evil Dead has it, which I have not seen. I will not see. It's too scary for me. Has it in the trailer. Has it with a cheese grater, right? That something so that you see every day and like, oh God, now I'm going to think about that all the time. Great,
right. But if it was like the cheese grater of Cthulhu, then it would be like, oh yeah, well, what else does Cthulhu use this for? I mean, yeah, certainly not to grate cheese because, okay. So that's the other thing. Okay. All right. I think that is all I have for this minute. And we certainly got some, it's not going to slow down, folks. The next minute's, yeah.
Yeah. We got the second half of this scene.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Yeah. So just be ready for that. But yeah, so that's all of my notes. Keenan, is there anything else we missed?
Nope. Let's get out of this.
Let's get out. Yeah. So folks, this has been another excellent.
Should we stop the show here? Should we just finish? This is the last.
Write in and let us know. Lester and Keenan, you guys need to go see a psychiatrist and to heal from this, and then also a priest. Yeah. No. Okay, folks, this has been another excellent Exorcist Minute. I have been Lester Ryan Clark. You can find me on all the socials as Lester Ryan Clark.
And I've been Keenan Diaz, and you can find me on Instagram and Letterboxd as Howdy Keenan.
Yes, we got our listener group, Compelling Conversations. Go check that out and request to join, and we'll let you in here with us. Thank you so much to everybody who has shared the show by word of mouth or on social media, and a big thank you to everyone who has given us a 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to our show. We really appreciate it, and that's going to help our little podcast grow and find more cool people like you. All right, Keenan, are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I think I am, Lester.
Folks, until next time,
the power of Gilbert Gottfried compels you.